So good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the third seminar in Kenny's series looking at building a local law 97 action plan. Perhaps a couple of words of introduction before I hand over to our speakers today. My name is Stephen Lythe. I'm the CEO of Kenny. And here at Kenny, we've been developing a strategy to look at the regulations of Local Law 97 and FISP because we see them as two very significant challenges that we believe there is an approach that can be attained by looking at them together. And that's been very much the focus over the past couple of weeks. As we demonstrated, we partnered with others to develop a capability to look at these two demands synergistically end to end. And through parts 1 and 2, we looked at the timelines and synergies between the laws and summarized overall approach, the impact, how we develop a readiness analysis and report, and what your options are in achieving compliance by 2030. If you missed those first two, they are recorded and we can provide you access to those after today without a problem. I think through today's seminar, our focus is going to now be the mobilization in terms of financial support. As we've demonstrated, we are looking to ensure that we can guide you through an assessment process, now through financing, and ultimately to implementation. Today, our principal speakers are going to be Tom O'Connor and David Miller, who bring us a lot of insight and expertise on PACE financing. John Rudisil and Thomas Seminara from Kenny will contribute more on technical questions relating to Local Law 97 and FISP. But perhaps I could ask, gentlemen, each one of you to introduce yourself. So let's go in the order of the pictures. So John, if you could start.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm John Rudisil. I'm a vice president here at Kenny, and I've been here for 21 years. My focus has primarily been in ground-up new construction, as well as redevelopment, facade replacement, window and glazing replacement, et cetera. And so this is where the focus on Local Law 97 has been critical in conjunction with FISP. And sitting across the room from me is Thomas Seminara, who's been dealing with the existing building side of the aisle.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the third part of our webinar series. As John said, I handle existing buildings, FISP, restoration here at Kenny, similar to John for the past 20 years or so. And we're excited to have this forum where we can introduce our theory and logic towards handling the Local Law 97 and FISP as a holistic approach to dealing with your projects. And we'd like to thank our guest speakers today for joining us and providing the critical portion of this, which many people are interested in, is how do we pay for this?
How do you pay for it, right? So good afternoon, Thomas.
Thank you. This is Tom O'Connor. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a partner at Duval and Stackenfeld, a law firm, and we focus primarily on real estate, all aspects of real estate. I chair the finance practice, and the focus of my practice over nearly 30 years has been real estate finance, all kinds, all means, mezz, preferred equity, schmezz, whatever it is you have it. If it's financing, I've done it. In about 4 or 5 years ago, I had a friend of mine who was a friend client who was in the real estate finance, moved to a new firm and called me up and said, "Hey, Tom, have you ever heard of PACE?" And about 4 or 5 years ago, I said, "Yeah, I've heard of PACE. I heard it's that thing nobody likes because everyone's prohibiting it." He goes, "Well, I'm doing PACE loans and I want to talk to you about it and I want you to learn about it." And that started 5 years ago. And since then it has been taking off and is really revitalized. It's revitalizing capital markets in a way that they haven't been in a long time. And it's becoming a big part of the capital markets. It's also very exciting. I've really been enjoying learning about PACE, and you'll hear about it today because it is evolving as we speak. It is an ever-changing market, and what's going on in PACE today will be different than what's going on in PACE probably 6 months from now. But, and we keep up with it. We think it's cool, and hopefully we'll convince you it is as well. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, David Miller, who has, like me, taken this by the horns to really learn anything and everything about it. And we've been working together on that. So David?
Hi, everyone. My name is David Miller. I'm an associate here at Duval & Stockenfeld, and I've been with the firm since 2017. Actually, I started in 2016 as a summer associate, but full-time started in 2017. I work very closely with Tom on a bunch of matters, but the most fun definitely are the PACE matters, and we'll delve more into it. But I went to Columbia Law School, and I just fell in love with PACE because it's a way to do good in the world and also get some good for some people. So it's exciting, and I hope that everyone else will share the interest after this presentation.
Okay, so why don't we start, I guess, yeah, why don't we, okay, so next slide. David, why don't you start us with the slide, and then we'll go continue. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And thanks for getting slide 1 up. All right, so first, what is PACE? We've talked about it a lot, but what exactly is PACE financing? So despite PACE being one of the best ways to around to create some positive and low-cost dollars for real estate, a lot of parties in the real estate world, a lot of major players, they don't know what it is. They haven't internalized the exceptional economic upside that PACE can bring. In a nutshell, PACE financing allows a property owner or developer to obtain some very advantageous financing for qualifying green energy building improvements. This is not something that's insignificant, as in some states, it can be up to 20% of the building's value, and in New York City, it can be up to 10% of the building's value. So you can finance up to 10% of the building value through PACE. So what exactly
for those of
PACE?
you, just let me interrupt. For those of you who love acronyms, PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. Sort of rolls off the tongue. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, well, so he took the words out of my mouth. The PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. No worries, no worries. And what it is it's key towards energy efficient improvements. So what it is the special form of financing that's actually a real estate tax assessment on the property, and it's repaid through the property's regular tax bill. Borrowers are able to obtain up to 100% of the financing costs of the hard and soft costs of qualified improvements. So this financing is at a competitive and fixed rate, and it's fully amortized over the useful life of the qualified improvements. The priority PACE assessment is analogous to other assessments on the property, like a sidewalk or a sewer assessment, and therefore mortgage loans are primed by the PACE assessment. So we'll get more into it later, but this has been part of the resistance to part of the resistance that senior lenders, mortgage lenders have had towards PACE. So the next important question, now that we have a general idea of what PACE financing is where is it? So we can go to the next slide, please. The first step to obtain PACE financing is determining if the jurisdiction of the property has passed PACE-enabling legislation, which provides for the special PACE assessment on the property tax bill. The PACE-enabling legislation establishes the framework for how the PACE program will work in that jurisdiction. Although PACE financing is available in many states, it's not available in every state. As of now, PACE-enabling legislation is active in 37 states, as well as Washington, D.C. This is up from 36 states last year because Washington just recently joined. So yay for Washington joining the PACE party. So in New York State in particular, PACE financing has been available for a couple years now, but it was not enabled in New York City until last year. This is when Local Law 96 was passed in conjunction with Local Law 97 and other local laws that were part of the Climate Mobilization Act. So once it's established that PACE financing is available in the jurisdiction that the property is located in, so again, it's available in New York City, the next step is to determine if the improvements in a particular project are eligible. basically what's eligible for PACE financing. The quick answer is qualified improvements, but that doesn't give you a lot of information. What a qualified improvement is addressed in the local legislation. So in New York City, what qualifies is very broad. Basically, it's any renovation or retrofitting of a building that reduces energy consumption. So examples include window and door replacement, lighting, caulking, weather stripping, air sealing, insulation, heating, cooling systems, and other types of similar improvements, so long as they're determined to be cost effective pursuant to a criteria that's established by the PACE authority. Some of the things that are specifically excluded are lighting fixtures and household appliances that are not permanently fixed to the property, because again, this is supposed to be more about the building property itself. Lighting fixtures don't qualify. So the PACE provider is someone that can actually really help the property owners through the process, because PACE financing is something that's new to a lot of borrowers, property owners. So one of the best things to do is get in contact with a PACE provider, and they'll walk you through the process of getting everything qualified and stuff like that. So as mentioned earlier, although PACE financing is payback through a special real estate tax assessment, it's actually private lenders that are ultimately usually the ones that are providing the funding for the project. So they're the PACE providers. So this brings us to our next slide, where my colleague Tom will discuss in further detail how does a PACE deal work.
Okay, so as David mentioned, in order to be able to get a PACE loan in any particular location, it has to have been legislatively enabled. And this picture sort of tells you why. You see, one of the biggest players in this process is the government. And the government doesn't get involved unless they pass laws that puts it in place. And so we've done PACE deals in a whole bunch of states. And whenever we get a new PACE deal and it's a state we haven't been to, the first thing we do is you look up the legislation, because even though it varies from state to state, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, I mean, even though it's pretty much the same, it does vary slightly, but it substantively works the same way. And this is what I'm going to describe here. And the other reason I also want to underline a little bit is this financing is what underlies it is a good social purpose. It's designed to reduce carbon, and it's the government's way through sort of a quasi-government private public partnership to incentivize builders to reduce their carbon footprint. So when I said this is kind of cool, if anyone knows me, I am anything but cool. I've been doing real estate finance for 30 years. Every time I told my kids about it, their eyes would roll over. But now, 25 years later, I'm a PACE lender. I represent PACE lenders. My son, who's a climate scientist, actually thinks I'm cool now. And I got to tell you, that goes that's not so easy. Okay, so this is how it works. So you do have to really, what underlies this is saving the earth. That's what this is about.
Tom.
And making money at the same time. So not bad. So how does it work?
Tom, I just have a question from somebody on the line. Dan Bianco, do you want to speak up? I'll just open your mic. Dan, you would like to ask a question? Nope, that's not working. All right, we'll carry on, and I'll get the question out of Dan another way.
Yeah, maybe if they email you or type, you can let us know what it is.
They can. If you have a question, anybody, you can also use the Q&A component within Zoom, and I'll pass the question on. Thank you.
So it's up in the chat. So
I can read it from the chat.
Okay.
It's can properties with tax exemptions owned, like for example, owned by nonprofits, utilize PACE financing when the owner is improving the building? So again, can properties with tax exemptions, parentheses, owned by nonprofits, close parentheses, utilize PACE financing when the owner is improving the building?
Okay, that's a great question. And I'm going to come back to the classic. I'm not even going to say the lawyer answer. It depends. But when I told you we have to check legislation. Every time we go to do a PACE loan, we would check the legislation in that jurisdiction. The answer to that is I would take a look at the legislation and see if there's anything prohibiting it. But I will tell you, in the major jurisdictions that we've done it, the answer is nothing would prohibit that. That would be okay. The fact that the property is exempt from real estate taxes does not mean it would be exempt from a PACE assessment. It gets billed and treated the same way as a tax, but this would be a voluntary assessment that the owner is taking on. So the short answer is subject to making sure there's nothing in separate, different jurisdictional regulations. I think the answer is that would be okay. David, do you have any other view towards that? No?
Okay. No, that's my thoughts too.
Okay. So how does the PACE deal work? I think we've sort of described it, but this picture is helpful. You start with, first of all, the local government, the legislation. A PACE capital provider, as David mentioned, is a private money, okay? You will see there just used to be a few of them a couple of years ago, and it wasn't a who's who of people maybe you heard of. There is now a lot of interest. Major funds are being put together to provide PACE funding because it's pretty advantageous from the lender's point of view. So that's private capital. They provide financing to a property owner. And it's funded very similar to the way, actually the same way a construction loan is funded. As the improvements are installed, they're funded. The difference between your typical construction financing is they're financing 100% of the cost of the green or qualified improvements. The PACE provider receives the benefit of the PACE assessment. What that PACE assessment is exactly what it says. It's in California, for example, it's called Notice of Assessment. It's a 1 or 2 page document. It says owner hereby consents and has agreed to a PACE assessment in the amount of X dollars against its property. It agrees to pay back the assessment according to the schedule set forth on Schedule A to this Notice of Assessment. Schedule A shows a series of fully amortizing payments over this life of the loan, which is we'll talk about. This is generally long term, and it shows June 1, 2022. $10,000, and it'll show the schedule of payments recorded right against the property. It's an assessment. That's how the PACE capital provider is secure. The notice of assessment is recorded against that property, they're the beneficiary of it, and it primes all mortgage lien. Now, sometimes the PACE assessment won't run directly to the PACE capital provider itself. It's generally a PACE administrator that administrates this in cooperation with the local government. It'll go to the administrator, and the administrator will work with the taxing authority in terms of collections, billing, and if there was ever enforcement. The property owner pays that assessment back through real estate taxes. The local government sends a bill to the property owner. You'll get your tax bill. It'll say real estate taxes, $10. PACE assessment, $5. Owner has to pay them both. The treatment between priority of real estate taxes and PACE assessments is treated differently in different jurisdictions. In some, it's pari passu. That means if you got $1, if real estate taxes were $1, PACE was $1, the property only paid $1, they split it 50-50. In some, New York City, for example, the legislation that was passed, the real estate taxes get paid in full before the PACE price. So real estate taxes actually prime the PACE assessment in New York City, assuming it goes through. So that's sort of ballpark how the structure works. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I love to make this comparison, and I think it's helpful to see a capital stack. The real advantage, we'll get some of the economics of a PACE loan, and why senior lenders, the mortgage lenders, are sort of seeing the benefits of it, is it lowers the overall cost of capital for the project. And lower cost of capital means less stress. It benefits the borrower, also benefits the lender. So here in this example, we have a project where your typical debt is 60 to 75%. Okay, this is on the column to the left. Then you have a mezz loan, right? Brings you up to maybe 70 to 75 to 80%, and then the equity is 15 to 20. As we know, that mezz debt is generally the most expensive piece after capital of the capital stack. you know, anywhere from, you know, in teens, whatever number you can get on construction mezz. Well, the size of the mezz loan typically is similar in size, maybe a little bigger because there's some limitations on the size of the PACE loan to the PACE. PACE comes in, instead of doing mezz, your interest rate now is a fixed interest rate. I think that's probably about right, 5.7 to 6% fixed long term. There's no, you know, there's no short maturity, right? Mezz right construction is going to come due upon stabilization, creates a potential refi risk. This thing just amortizes over 20, 25, 30 years, and the cost is less. So this is eight basis points. This is a big significant difference in the cost of the deal, and shows one of the how PACE could be slugged in to this. Now, obviously, the difference that senior lenders are going to have is when you look at this, the senior debt primes the mezz and would wipe it out. Here, the PACE is priming the debt, and that's been the rub in the capital markets that's quickly changing. We'll talk about the perception of that as we go forward. If it's okay, let's move to next slide. Okay, and David,
right,
in this slide, we're going to cover two things. Basically, we're going to get a little legalese on you, talk about some legal issues, and David's going to cover some of the issues and how this works for the borrowers, and I'll talk about numbers.
All right, thank you, Tom. So from the borrower side, there are a bunch of advantages to having PACE financing. A couple of them were discussed earlier, but just to accentuate that, first, you get 100% financing of hard and soft costs. So when compared to traditional construction financing, you're able to get, instead of whatever, 50, 55, 60% of the improvements, you're able to get 100% of it. And that's, again, inclusive of soft costs. So that's pretty awesome. It's a pretty good deal for the borrower. In addition, it's self-amortizing debt. So unlike normal construction debt, where you have a balloon payment, interest-only balloon payment at the end of the life of the loan, this is something that's self-amortizing, and it's the length of the loan, the term of the loan, depends on the useful life of the improvement itself. So generally, you see somewhere in the 10, 20, even 30-year range. So this is long-term financing, and again, obviously, with the longer the term, the lower that the payments are, and per month, but it's not per month actually. Normally, whatever you're paying, maybe it's per month or per quarter. Here, what you'll do is you'll be paying back again through your property taxes. So you'll be paying one lump sum every year, or every twice a year, depending on your jurisdiction. But again, because it's a long term, the payments themselves should be smaller. In addition, it's mandated that PACE is fixed rates, so you'll know what you're getting, especially in the rate environment right now. You can get some really great rates and have them locked up for 15, 20, 25, 30 years, depending. That seems like a pretty good deal as well. In addition, it's based on the value of the asset. Here would be the property. It's not based on the credit of the property owner. So historically, PACE financing has been marketed as like guarantee-free. That is somewhat changing. We've been seeing a recent trend in the market that as PACE loans get larger and larger, instead of being in the the 500,000, million, 2 million range, now it's getting up to that 20, 30. Even we had a deal where it can get up to hundreds of millions. We are seeing that lenders are now requiring completion guarantees. So this is, again, a nuanced aspect of PACE financing that's evolving. But even then, only having a completion guarantee as opposed to other guarantees that normally go with mortgage loans or construction loans.
Yeah, there's no, to chime in on that, I have not seen, and doesn't mean this isn't going to, one of the things I said is that this is evolving as we speak. I have not seen bad boy carve-out guarantees, credit guarantees, carry guarantees, schmarry guarantee, whatever it is. I have just seen, and in isolate, and in not the majority, I have seen in larger deals construction guarantees, and those construction guarantees are somewhat more limited than what you typically see in construction financing. But that is starting to creep its way into the market as PACE becomes more integrated into the capital markets. Okay, go ahead, Dave. Once you figure it, once you continue it. Yeah.
Yep. And the last advantage that we're going to talk about today is that it's fully transferable to the next owner. It's like your property taxes. So there is a possible caveat that with completion guarantees or construction guarantees possibly creeping their way in, there might need to be some kind of replacement guarantee to replace that. But other than that, it's fully transferable to the next owner. And it's not even something that has to be assigned, because it's whenever you purchase a building, for example, of course, the property taxes go with it. There's no need to pay for anything. Same thing with the pay. It's
no consent. Yeah, there's no consent of the lender to do it. It's just, it gets assumed. It goes with the land.
Exactly.
When you sell.
Moving on to Tom with the impact on lenders.
Let's talk about that transferability for a second before I talk about lenders. Since some of you may have been maybe thinking this, we know, as I talk about lenders, there is still resistance in the credit markets. Some lenders do not want to have PACE financing on their property. Many do, many more do today than they used to. Lenders like Starwood, Acor are permitting PACE financing. Not only permitting it, they're also they're starting to invest in it themselves. But however, when you if you're a borrower taking a PACE loan, you have to think to yourself, okay, what if I refinance in 5 years, 4 years down the road, and I have a PACE loan? What if I'm going to go to the market, try to get the best deal I can, and is this going to be an impediment? Some lenders won't permit it, and that might be the case. But I would wager that when you refinance in 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, the list of senior lenders from PACE will be much longer than it is today. But you still got to worry about that. So PACE takes into account the loans are prepayable. So if you were selling the property, no one didn't want to take it, you're refinancing it, they can be prepaid. There are prepayment premiums that generally burn off between 3 and 5 years. I've not seen them go past 5 years, and they're not onerous. So there is the flexibility that if you do need to refi and take it out, you're transferring, selling, and it has to be paid off, it can be. The impact on lenders. One thing we all know is the CMBS markets have not accepted PACE. You will still see when you look at CMBS documents that PACE loans and this type of support, this kind of financing or priming loan would be generally prohibited. Although what's happening is it's being done on a case-by-case basis, and then it's being written in as exceptions in securitized loans, and that's starting to happen more and more. But the mortgage loan is prime. That means technically that if the PACE lender were to foreclose, and how does he foreclose? Well, he has a tax assessment against the property. The PACE lender will foreclose the same way as the tax. Actually, the PACE lender doesn't foreclose, the taxing authority does. They're doing an agreement or contract, or what's in the legislation, that if the PACE assessment is not paid, there's various notices, and then ultimately the taxing authority is directed to have a tax sale. Now, technically, in that tax sale, if someone comes in and takes over the property in a tax sale, the mortgage loan will be wiped out. That's what causes mortgage lenders concern. However, different than other loans, just as you have in taxes, let's suppose you made a $20 million PACE loan, and the annual assessment, I'm just making up numbers, is $500,000. And there's a default. You have 1 year's worth of assessments, $500,000 is delinquent, interest accrues. A second year assessment's delinquent, interest accrues. Well, when someone shows up at the tax sale to buy that property, and the $20 million doesn't get accelerated. You don't owe 20. It's like it's an assessment. It stays there. All that has to be paid is the past due assessments. That means the senior lender, in order to preserve their position, doesn't have to come out $20 million. All they have to do is basically pay the unpaid tax, which savvy lenders now, what they're doing is they're reserving that. So the actual risk, even though lenders are primed, of a lender being primed, is you'd have to imagine what lender is going to allow its senior loan to be wiped out for basically payment of some tax assessments. it's never happened. And if that does happen, we've got more problems than the mortgage loan being primed by a PACE loan. So that's the impact on the lender. And what I'm seeing lenders doing, and I represent lenders and what I advise them to do is, just like you do for real estate taxes, you take a reserve for it. Just as you do for real estate taxes, you can have recourse for failure to pay PACE assessments if there's sufficient revenue to pay it, or whatever way it gets negotiated. And the lenders can protect themselves vis-a-vis these PACE payments. As we said before, it is treated as a real estate tax. It is paid with the real estate taxes. And the impact on lenders also is that the overall capital cost of the project is reduced, giving them more room, giving the borrower more breathing space, making the project more viable. But the long-term impact is that the whole purpose of this is reducing energy costs. So as the energy costs of the building go down, well, you have better NOI, better net operating income, less expenses. The expenses are less, so it improves the NOI on the properties that in terms of operating costs. I'm not going to a point as to whether that's offset by the cost of the PACE financing, but that is a cost that would get capitalized anyway. So let's turn to the next slide. So how can PACE help? David, I think what we really need to talk a little bit about, and we have a little bit of time, I think we really have to talk about what's happened in New York City. And also something that the folks at County really astutely picked up on, brought our attention to, and I think is really real love. But David, why don't you talk about the PACE financing in New York City? What's going on?
Absolutely. So again, PACE was enabled in New York City with Local Law 96, and it was passed in conjunction with Local Law 97 and the rest of the Climate Mobilization Act. And the real reason why it was included was to help pay for these improvement costs. So what you can do is you can use it to pay for the improvements that will have to be made to buildings in order to comply with Local Law 97 and its carbon emissions. And as County picked up on, there's really a strategy that you can use to look at FISP in conjunction with Local Law 97. And you can do that with PACE as well. You can kind of piggyback onto that strategy. So if something were to qualify for Local Law 97 that you're doing to help qualify with FISP, that would be able to be financed by the PACE financing as well. So it's unfortunately right now, PACE has yet to be fully brought forward in New York City, but we're hoping that soon it will be. So basically,
we're waiting for forms, some basically procedural items. We have the legislation, but you need the form of notice of assessment, and that's supposedly pending and coming out by September. So go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, so fingers crossed on that. Unfortunately, I'm sure we've all dealt with New York City before, and they have a lot going on. So it's not been a quick process, and also COVID, of course, has delayed the process as well. But
I'd like to know if the county folks agree with this. I mean, the way I look at this, what's happened to, you think about developers, owners of real estate in New York, got hit with sort of a double whammy.
Right.
You had the Climate Mobilization Act gets passed, which means you have to put in these capital improvements to reduce carbon, and then the timing. The county folks can talk about the timing of the FISP inspection requirements tightening up, which also. So they both sort of happened. I don't know the timing. At the near time. So you have two items of cost that property owners have to figure out. And County put two and two together, saying that, well, wait a minute, PACE could be, getting, two birds with one stone. It could be a way to address the Climate Mobilization Act requirements and address FISP. I don't know if
right.
John or Thomas, you want to
comment? No, because you're absolutely right. I mean, and in particular with FISP, the law became much more stringent with regards to masonry, cavity wall buildings. mandating more probes, mandating a much more rigorous inspection. And as we know, those buildings, particularly, the brick masonry cavity walls from the 50s, 60s, set all the way up to probably the mid 90s. It was a brick veneer or masonry veneer, 1-inch airspace, no insulation, and a backup wall. And so those get really hit hard because the deterioration after 50, 60 years, you have to do FISP repairs to keep the public safe and to keep the building structurally stable, but they're also getting killed on energy. Uninsulated walls, they're leaking air like a sieve. So that's why, we were very excited about this PACE because both FISP and Local Law 97 are running concurrently, and they have deadlines that coincide with each other, 2024, 2025, and then every 5 years after that. And, the requirements for keeping the building safe will only become more stringent over time. There's much more oversight over that, particularly in light of some of the recent tragedies. And the carbon emissions, the allowable caps keep getting reduced. From 2024, they basically get cut in half going into 2030, and then they're reduced every 5 years after that. So a lot of building owners are looking at options of facade recladding, facade replacement. Because you just can't. There's really not much else you can do for a lot of these masonry cavity wall buildings. But also another type of building that gets hit very hard is the curtain wall. The glass and aluminum buildings from the 50s, 60s, again, those early days before they had thermal broken technologies and sophisticated insulated glass technologies. So, building owners are faced with every 5 years, I got to pour money into my buildings. I got to keep them safe for FISP. And now I got to figure out a way to make them more energy efficient. And that's where you're talking about $15 million, $20 million building envelope replacement and recladding projects, because that really tackles two birds with one stone. You put a new facade on your building, the technologies they have today, you're not going to be doing rigorous, or you're not going to be faced with huge FISP maintenance costs. And you can put a very energy efficient, all kinds of recladding or redevelopment options here that'll keep you covered for Local Law 97 for the next 20, 30 years at least.
So with the option of using PACE financing in conjunction with reducing the yearly outlay of cash, free energy, that's literally flying out the window. The cost of running your building is going to reduce.
And then you bundle in the mechanical side too. That's the other thing.
Of course,
And that's when our colleague Adam Farber was speaking to in the first two webinars from MG Engineering. Look, there's a lot of the quote unquote low hanging fruit that you can do that you don't need PACE for in terms of light fixtures and automated controls. But when you really get into those heavy duty equipment replacement, again, that's where
big initial expense, but amortized over a course of a few years, you get a return on your investment there, and having this financing option at a low interest rate that's transferable, that includes hard and soft costs. It really winds up being a nice package that is palatable for building owners and managers to deal with this rather cumbersome.
You need something now because given our current circumstances, everybody's feeling a whole lot of pain.
Yes.
Right. But you got to keep New York City. You got to keep people safe.
Yeah.
You
got to protect the environment.
It's not an option to allow things to fall off your building anymore. And we know that it's the right thing to do to reduce energy, reduce our carbon footprint. Look, and at the end of the day, we're not saving Mother Earth, we're saving ourselves. But it's enormously expensive, and particularly for a couple of types of buildings are really hit hard.
They can get hit off. Yeah,
they get hit hard. Those 50-year-old, 40-year-old curtain wall and cavity wall. So this seems like a great option for building owners.
So if for those, like, if you would say, okay, well, all right, sounds great. How do I get started? What do I do? Well, what I would say to you, first step is if you're in New York City, the first thing you need to do, and I think this was probably covered already, is you have to figure out what is my building's carbon footprint and how does it fit in with the requirements of 24, 2030, and so forth. And that's something like what Canny does. We have engineering firms that they go out, they take a look at the footprint, They look to compare, and there's actually data that's put out by the city how what the footprint of every building is, and how it's going to miss or meet targets. So the first step is what is your carbon footprint? What do you need to do to reduce it? The next thing, if you're going to thinking about PACE, you got to contact. The best way to do is contact the PACE provider. We talked about these private. There are several good ones. We represent so many of them. We can put them in touch with you on that. And they would be the one that could really navigate you through the underwriting, the money that would be available, what it could be provided for. I'm good. If we have time, I usually start with this, but I'm going to end myself and then turn it over to the county. I'm going to end with a PACE joke. Yes, there is a PACE joke. Okay.
Let's hear it.
And it's very hard to tell a joke into the Uber space, but I'm going to give it a shot. So, Planet One meets up with Planet Two. Planet One says to Planet Two, "My gosh, Planet Two, what's wrong? You don't look so good." Planet Two says, "I know, I've got Homo sapiens." "Oh, don't worry," Planet One says, "it won't last long." So we are hoping that PACE helps to change the dark humor in that joke. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our county folks.
Tom, David, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insight to the PACE financing world. I hope our listeners have a better picture of what's involved in this and how you guys can assist in the overall strategy to dealing with this rather cumbersome, next couple of years that we have ahead of us. As you said, certainly if you have buildings that you're working on or own or run, yes, please call Canny. We'll put you in touch with all the people involved to answer your questions, to get you on the path to solving these problems. We're going to continue providing these webinars in the future as more information comes to light, as the
laws are going to evolve.
Yeah, the laws evolve. The situation for the application for the PACE is not yet finalized, so we're keeping our information as current as possible. We're going to update everybody frequently. We'd love to assist. And if you have any questions now, I think we have a couple of minutes left to maybe answer any other questions that anyone in the audience may have. But you can certainly reach out to us anytime. We'd be glad to walk you through this and how we can set you up for compliance in the near future.
So at this time, I'm seeing no questions come in. And certainly, I think David and Tom addressed a wide range of questions that I certainly would have asked. Again, if you've got questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. This video will also be available for you to review. And if you'd like some further discussion, if there are other people within your organization that would benefit from this, reach out. We're very happy to continue to educate and ultimately facilitate solutions in this space from inception through financing to finally implementation. So thanks very much, everybody, for speaking and for our attendees as well. Thank you.
One quick question, David and Tom, if you're still there, who actually fills out the PACE paperwork?
Well, as a law firm, we do the PACE documents for the PACE lender. It's a great question. The borrower will provide information to the PACE lender for its underwriting, its building, and all its application type stuff. The PACE documents are actually very pro forma. They're not, when you think of hundreds of pages of loan documents, they're typically standardized forms that are pretty simple.
Would the evaluation of the building have to be done prior to the paperwork being filled out? So they would do an initial underwriting, and they would do that evaluation and underwrite before it went to legal and you were going to go close your loan.
So,
Right, so ideally, we would do the evaluation of the building and say, this is what we presume, or this is what we've discovered that the building lands and what the plan is, and then the next step would be to fill out the base paperwork.
Right, and then close. So the whole process, maybe it's 90 days. By the time you start, you talk to them, they underwrite you. They really underwrite the improvements, and qualified improvements are generally pretty broadly defined. It's generally things that reduce carbon. Okay, and what they would do that, they would figure out the value, how much, how they would size the PACE loan, and work out a funding schedule in terms of how, when it's going in and how they're funding, and go forward from there. One thing I know we did not address, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds because it's very important. A recent development PACE in light of COVID, because that's put some stress on some building operators because they're closing, is several jurisdictions are allowing PACE funding to happen retroactively from 1 to 3 years after you put the improvements in. You can then go get a PACE loan. So when you think about that, that could be a way of recapitalizing some capital, pulling some money out to maybe get through tough times. And some people are doing that. They're basically refinancing. But again, you're still financing the qualified improvements, but if you didn't do it during, it's not too late. There's a window of time that you can go after the fact and get it done.
That's a great point. And certainly something that I'm sure our clients are going to be interested in following up with, because there are a lot of FISP-related improvements that we're currently working on right now that we believe we can get into the approval for the PACE financing.
Yep.
One last question is any of it based on the return on investments for energy? I think the answer is no, but if you guys...
Tom, I don't know if you disagree, but I believe that in most of the PACE statutes, and I believe it is in the New York City statute, that the cost of the PACE overall has to equal the savings or exceed the savings. I don't want to misspeak, so Tom, if you disagree, let me know.
No, I think that sounds right. Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just if you have anything else to add, please feel free.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, because I was just to reiterate. So a lot of PACE statutes will say that in order to qualify for the financing itself, how much the financing is has to be met or exceeded by the energy cost savings over time. So that was just to have a more succinct answer.
Very good. Thank you very much again, Dave and Tom, for speaking today. And again, if anybody has questions, follow-up, would like some discussion, please feel free to reach out. And this session will be available to watch post-review. So again, thank you for attending, and we'll keep you in touch with future events as we develop them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.